Okay, so welcome everybody, and so let me go ahead and get started. What we're going to learn about today is I have 4 things that I'm going to talk about. So I have a lot of material for you, and I'm going to first start and talk about Microsoft Office InfoPath 2003, and particularly what's new in Service Pack 1, but I'll show you a little bit of what's going on in the product overall. I'm going to talk about migrating to Access 2003 from previous versions of Access and go through some of the challenges I bet a few of you have had in the past. And then I'll talk about Windows SharePoint Services, which Steve Ballmer touched on this morning a little bit. And then finally, I want to wrap up and just talk to you a little bit about what goes on in terms of developing trustworthy software for the Office products, in particular how we handle bugs and crashes and stuff in the product. So a lot of things to cover. I want to start off by just doing a quick slide reminding folks of all the parts of the Microsoft Office system. So the Office system encompasses the Office professional applications that many of you use and know, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, Outlook, Access. It also includes the applications Project and Visio and Front Page, and 2 new applications with this release of products, Microsoft Office OneNote and InfoPath. And so we have sessions on just about everything over the course of the next few days, so I would encourage you to take a look in the BPR tracks and look things up there. We also have Office Live Meeting, which you've heard about some this week already, and Office Online is our website that has tens of thousands of templates and tons of clip art and how-to articles. It's also the location for those of you that are in the deployment and administration of Office for the Office Resource Kit. And something I wanted to tell you about that just came out this week is we posted on the site what's different between Office 2003 and previous versions of Office. We posted whole big white papers, 40, 50 pages long, that go through deployment and features, application by application, talking about the differences between each release. And so there's actually 3 white papers, one for 2000, one for XP, and one for 97, and relative to Office 2003. And we also have some important parts of the Microsoft Server system, Windows Server system, that are really important for us in the Office business. 2 of those are Microsoft Exchange. And so there are many, many sessions on the deployment of Exchange and Outlook and some of the new features that we've got there. And also part of the Windows Server 2003 is Windows SharePoint Services, which is the collaborative infrastructure for sharing information between teams and organizations. So that's just a few of the things in the Office system. And one of the things that we tried really hard to do this release is we've really worked hard to integrate them all in a very smooth and nice way, and actually they were so integrated that they all sort of released at the same time. And so that was really a whole lot of work for us, and probably a lot of stuff for all of you to absorb in a very short time. So we're taking our time and trying to do the very best we can to talk about and help folks to learn what's new and what the benefits and the value are in the entire Office system. So let's talk about the one new member of the Office system. It's called Microsoft Office InfoPath. So I'm going to do the survey where I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I just want a quick show of hands for people who've used or played around or touched on InfoPath a little bit. Excellent. So I will not dwell on it too much, but there were about a third or more of you who hadn't seen it before. But those of you who haven't, InfoPath is an Office desktop program designed for the gathering of information in rich dynamic forms. So if you've ever written an application that's about gathering data from end users, that's what InfoPath is all about, except it does more than just display the information. It's really all about taking that data and gathering it using rich structured XML. But on top of that, it's really a designer and a platform for building a new generation of electronic forms. Because what it does is it lets you have either an end user design environment where you can point and click and develop your forms with writing no code, or you can also tie that in and use scripting, or, as I'll show you today, using managed code in Visual Studio to develop your forms applications. It was available this fall as part of Office 2003. It's in what's called the Office Professional Enterprise edition of the product, or you can get it standalone as well. And what we're going to do is we've actually updated the product pretty significantly in Service Pack 1, and so it has a lot of new features. And I will not I will get at the end of this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the difference between the new and the old, but for those of you who haven't seen the product, just assume it's all part of one thing. So what are some of the benefits of InfoPath? So first, it's really about gathering information more flexibly and accurately. So those of you that have, which all of you have written web forms to collect data from individuals, that works super well if the information is very lightweight or very free form. But if you've got to connect what you're collecting to other data to sort of do, say, a join or a valid lookup table, or you want to do some validation of information, it starts to get very complex to manage the state of that application, to develop warnings or error messages for users, and to really do a really good job. It's also really tricky to do some very straightforward things like have rich formatting. So you want to collect feedback from on a survey or performance review, and people want to put in bulleted lists or text formatting. It gets a little tricky to do that in a very nice and rich way. It's also challenging to do offline support. So that's a really big feature of InfoPath, because every form is really just a document. And so it's just a file that you can mail around as an attachment. You can work on it offline, submit it when you want, or you can just save them out to a file server and process them at a later date. And also, if you've tried to write the application purely in a thin client manner, you've probably had some difficulties doing accessibility, or to really have a high quality user interface. Because InfoPath is just an Office application, it adheres to all of the accessibility requirements here in the US called Section 508 and their equivalents overseas, and it has a very rich customizable user interface as well. But that's the user perspective, but the neat thing about InfoPath is that it's really about this core data model of using XML schema to accurately and effectively collect and gather information. So you can have a schema that's already defined out by a business process that you don't own, that you have to integrate with. You can define your own schema, or you can just build a form and have that schema designed for you while you're developing the form. So InfoPath is very rich at attaching to schema and working with those existing ones, and it has a design by form view. Those of you who have used products like Access before, you can imagine what that's like. And so it also has we have built-in support for connecting to XML web services. So this allows a very rich client front end that can then go out and talk to web services, and that can do that for pushing the information out to the web service, or it can use it for integrating information from a web service into the form completion experience. And therefore, it works with all of your existing business processes, the old ones that you've taken. For example, at Microsoft, we've taken our time and absence reporting application, which was a legacy N-tier application, and we wrote a web service front end for it, which then allowed us to create an InfoPath front end and talk directly to that data. And one of the things that we've done in Service Pack 1 is add full support for digital signatures as well. So you can have sections of your form that are signed, or you can have signature fields that are used throughout that validate the information, and I'll show that a little bit later. And then finally, the other core benefit, of course, is that it's a very rapid application development environment. For the out-of-the-box user, we've got a whole rich set of over 20 built-in templates that you can use and customize on your own for all sorts of different business forms. Of course, you can design your own form from scratch, which is what we're going to do. And you can also connect that up with script, as I mentioned earlier. So we have the Visual Script Editor. If you just want to do very lightweight coding that kind of is easy to do and easy to deal with. And then if you want to do sophisticated development, we can do all the same kind of features hooked up with the Visual Studio tools for Office or visualstudio.net and do all managed code behind all of the form events and the form filling out. So a very rich set of customization tools and development environment. So I think InfoPath is a really unique tool for your tool arsenal in that it encompasses very easy to use end user benefits, along with a very rapid development environment for power users or for quick and dirty demos or prototypes, or just applications that aren't going to last a long time, like they ever really don't last a long time. They, sort of you write them once and this is going to be quick, and then 10 years later we're all working on it. And I was just talking to somebody who was talking about their application lasting a long time. And then also for those real line of business applications, you can use managed code. The other thing you can do with InfoPath is it works really well by connecting to other Microsoft web services like BizTalk, where you've got existing coordination and collaboration services. We've also done a good job of handling the deployment and the management of the applications. The InfoPath form definition can travel around with the form, and we can do a good job of keeping it up to date, so everybody that's using the form is also always using the current application and the current logic. So what does the solutions landscape for InfoPath look like? Well, it really starts off at the very, what you call the low end, which is very ad hoc and focused on the team. So we have a number of templates that are really very basic for doing things like status reports or surveys, where, to quickly roll those out in using web forms, it becomes very tricky because you've really got to do some significant development to get that done, whereas InfoPath, it's easy enough for the end users in the organization to develop those forms and then combine them with using Windows SharePoint Services as a data collection server. And so that's really for the 5 or 10 user kind of scenario. And as you move up, you start to get to scenarios that are very focused on sort of the department IT use, asset tracking or customer service, where it's a specific line of business where they want to do customer. And there's where you start to develop a department application, a little bit more sophisticated, might involve multiple forms, might involve connecting to some line of business data. And InfoPath is a great tool to bridge that fully custom solution and the out-of-the-box kind of quick solution that you'd like to develop. And then finally, there's the enterprise application that InfoPath excels at, which is really developing a line of business front end for either an existing legacy system or a system that you're writing from scratch, exposing web services. And things like procurement or expense management, using government forms. We've seen a lot of interest in that. And so InfoPath really spans that whole range of solutions. So here's an example that some folks have, which is that some customers have done, which is a scenario around budgeting. And so really this is a budgeting request that happens for the IT customers within an organization have been asking for funding, and this is actually in the United States and in our Office of Management and Budget. And so before this InfoPath system was developed, the way that this worked was you would submit a file as a text object. You would basically mail a text file saying, please send money. And that was really the extent of the system for budget requests. And what the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, did was first they created a standard XML schema for budget requests. And so this was done actually before InfoPath and is really part of the whole idea of standardizing on schemas, which InfoPath can work really well with. And then what was done was InfoPath created a form experience. So there was a document type, and it was a very flexible, offline, rich type of document. It had a form part of it, which was about data validation. It had dynamic calculations, and it had a dynamic structure. And so this is one of the key elements of InfoPath, is the ability for the structure to change depending on the kind of data. So for example, one of the trickiest things to code in forms is sections that have repeating values. So an invoice is sort of a classic one of those. How many lines do you allow for the invoice? And if you're anything like me, the first time you did that as a standard web-based solution, you either just kept round-tripping and adding one line at a time to the invoice, or you just said, you know what, we're going to just have 10 items. And you made 10 rows of edit controls, and you just allowed for 10 items in the invoice. And if you wanted more, you had to re-invoice and do another application. And those are both pretty common ways of solving the problem. InfoPath actually has built in the whole notion of repeating fields and repeating values within it, and so it's as easy as dragging and dropping from a tool palette. And then finally, the application has built-in navigation, help, and views. So in the course of building your application, you're able to define what shows up in a task pane as assistance for filling out the form and guidance for the end users filling this out. And also, the navigation is adjustable depending on where you are in the schema, that hierarchy of nodes in XML. And also, you can have different views of the form. So you might want a long form, a short form. You might want a roll-up or a form that shows the different types of information depending on who the user of or the filler out of the form is. And then finally, what this system did was it connected with a back-end system and workflow, which can evolve independently. So there's a whole budget system that once it gets requests, it moves through an approval chain and moves through their back-end system. But InfoPath served as an independent front end that just expedited the data gathering function of the organization. So the way that you see this is you've got a project manager who's the person who needs the support of IT, who generates the InfoPath front-end request, which is using the OMB schema, which has a well thought through validation and support that's either permitted or not permitted in filling it out. And it goes back and forth to a portal-based web service, so a .NET web service that takes that request, packages it up, and sends it to the official government back-end system. That's a very, very big and sort of untouchable legacy system right now. And so it really delivered some very significant business value in a very short order because it significantly reduced all the processing time. There was no rekeying of the information. There were no errors involved because the information wasn't valid. All the fields were filled out before the form was submitted. And it did a great job for that. And then it also removed the form from the back-end tool. So as the process changes, if the form needs to change, it can be reflected separately in the form. And also, the form can evolve at a faster rate to improve the data gathering and improve the handling. And plus, the Office-like experience of just having a nice app where you're basically typing in what looks like a Word document really limited the retraining and any other efforts that needed to happen. And so we've gotten very positive feedback, and we've seen these kind of systems over and over again in terms of really using InfoPath for some good solutions. What I want to talk about today is just a few of the updates that we've got in Service Pack 1. And so what I would say is that we did InfoPath 2003, and we got an enormous amount of early feedback. We had hundreds of customers building, using, and deploying solutions even before we RTM'd the InfoPath product because it was so exciting to them. And so we listened very, very closely. And so Service Pack 1 is really this very fixed set of additions to the product that are very focused on very specific customer needs. And first among those was having managed code support, which I'll show in a second. We have the ability to connect to ADO.NET and those data sets. We've integrated with BizTalk 2004 for human workflow. And these are all the developer issues. We've done some work just in improving the core user experience or the core developer experience in terms of schema handling, perf, and doing some calculations in fields without having to write script. We also support more types of custom controls. We do handle for applications that do connect to web services, what we've done is improve the ability to detect within the application that you're writing whether you're offline or not. So you can enable or disable the user experience and do a good job there. And for end users, we've made it so that you can more easily email the forms around. We've made some improvements there. One of the scenarios with InfoPath is you can just, while you're filling out the form, if you want to send it around to people, just like in all the other Office applications, click on the Mail button and it drops down a mail header that connects up to Outlook, and you just type the to from addresses. It sends out as a HTML mail message, a static view, along with an MHTML or bundled up attachment type that sends the whole form to the user so that they want to, there's the scenario of they just want to see the information in the form, or they also want to fill it out, edit it, or route it around in a workflow. And we've supported digital signatures, the ability to sign a document to authenticate the user of the form or the person who filled out the form, as well as to prevent tampering or manipulation of the form as well. We've added a signature field that actually maps to the tablet PC. So we see a lot of interest and support for doing InfoPath forms based on using ink signatures on a tablet PC. So we actually allow that as well. And we've also enabled an automation model for doing some forms automation. So those are just a few of the new features in InfoPath 2003 Service Pack 1, which will be available with all of the Office 2003 SP1 this summer. And so we're pretty excited about that. So a lot of great stuff in the product. And one of the things that's really been great about InfoPath is that there are a lot of places for you to turn for additional support, for training, for partnerships, and for add-ins and code that work really well with InfoPath. And so we have a great deal of support all around the world in the services arena, and in the third-party product arena, and in the training and usage arena. So it's really off to a great start, and it's a great tool for your toolbox. So before I go into a demo, just want to summarize InfoPath is this new generation of electronic forms. And really the key is blurring this distinction between a very rigid web-based form and a way too flexible Word document or Excel document that you might have used in the past. And so really bringing those two together and blurring that distinction. It's really good at rapid application development. It's easy and secure for deployment. It lets you integrate with any other services, existing web processes through web services. We allow you to create dynamic forms that change the way they look based on the data and the schema that you're using. And it also allows you to just extract that data as an important input into the process. And it allows you to have different views on that data so you can have continuity with the forms over time. And of course, above all, it's essentially an XML standards-based editor and design tool for you. So at its core, it's really just about XML. It allows you to use XSLT and XPath, XSD, UDDI, and web services, all out of the box. And so it's a super flexible tool for building this next generation of forms for you. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to do a demo now. Oh, actually, I will say really quick, I don't know if he's in the audience, because if he is, I'm going to be really embarrassed, because he'll do a better demo than I am. But Andrew Watt is one of our MVPs and wrote a terrific book on how to use InfoPath. And we make nothing from the book or anything. I just wanted to plug it, because Andrew did a terrific job writing one of the first books on it for us. So let me go ahead and switch over to the demo. So first, when you start InfoPath, the first thing you'll do is the end user, or the sort of the go to the start menu and start the product view, is you'll get a whole list of sample forms for you to create. You know, we have absent requests, expense reports, invoicing, meeting agendas, issue tracking, project plans, purchasing requests, sales reports, even resumes and service requests. All sorts of these are built-in samples that are out of the box. All of those have the code, and you can customize any of them and use them for your own processes, or just use them to learn from and to start from. But we're all pretty high-end developers, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over into Visual Studio, and I'm going to actually create an InfoPath form template directly from Visual Studio. So this is just create a new project, and so I'm going to go, oops, I lost my mouse. Hey, sorry about that. There's the mouse. I'm going to go over here and create a new project. I'm going to say I want to do it from a brand new blank form. So this is the nothing up my sleeves kind of demo, but it's not going to result in some amazing thing. I'm actually just going to show you the product. I have this thing. I really don't like those easy-bake kind of out-of-the-oven demos that show off everything. So I'm just going to show the form here. So when you're in Visual Studio, you can actually see all sorts of the whole project here, but I'm going to actually go into InfoPath. So this is the core InfoPath surface. Kind of looks like a blank document. Over here in the design tasks, you can see all sorts of cool features for you to use. First, you can pick the layout of different elements of the form. Do you want tables, one column, custom tables, all sorts of stuff like that. You've also got a list of all the different kind of controls that you can drag and drop onto the form. The standard kind down here, but here are all the ones that I mentioned before about having repeating sections. So you want to do a status report where people list each status update as a bulleted list item, rather than just having a one bullet and telling them to type from there, and then maybe fighting with auto format a little to make it work right. You just use the InfoPath repeating sections for bullets. And we also allow, actually new with SP1, file attachments as part of the form. So say you want to do a form that collects digital images, like an insurance claim form. So you can just attach the images to the form and build that right in as an attachment control. And I mentioned ink as well. Here's one of my favorites. This is the data source. Now we haven't added any data yet. This is where your XML schema would show up. So what you can do is you can add schema elements one at a time manually by typing in their name, saying their type, and building the XML class hierarchy directly there. You can import an existing schema, and it'll just populate this. Or you can do what we're going to do, which is just go over to the controls section and drag and drop controls onto the sheet and create your schema that way. So I've just dragged and dropped one control. I'm actually going to go back to the data source. You can now see there's the control that I just dragged. So we're defining a schema as we go along. And so that's design by form kind of creation of a schema. So I'm going to go over here. So this is just one edit control. So you can resize it and get to all the neat properties like that. I'm going to double click on it. So here's where the easy stuff really starts. Actually, I should say if I I can go there and I can set I can just start typing anywhere on the screen that I want. I can insert tables, I can center things, I can align them differently. It's just like using a word processor. In fact, I'm going to go here and I might just change the font here and make it pretty big so we'll be able to see it later. So I'm going to double click on this. So the text box properties has many things that we're all familiar with. It has formatting. We also have background spell checking within InfoPath, so that allows you to do forms that have full rich fields where people can type and then enable the spell checking. Again, a very rich client experience. And all the size things with a lot of control over that. Here are the screen tips for accessibility and just providing extra help, along with the alternate access keys and things like that. Here's all the data binding information as well. So one of the first things that you need to do with a form is you really want to make sure that the data that goes into the form is valid. So what you can do is you can go in here and there's a whole engine for adding without code data validation. So this is the place where you spend a lot of time writing code and you're basically encoding this business logic in very tricky code. It's lots of cascading ifs, it's switch statements, it's checking state. And so this allows you to do it with all sorts of, with a rules-based engine. You can define a rule. Basically, you'll have a drop-down for all the fields in the form. And so here's this field, and I'm going to say, if this field is the word hi, what I'm going to want to do is just go ahead and put up a little alert message that says, hi there, a message box. And, oops, forgot to enter screen tip. And so then I've got this, and I can do this at different times in the event processing, either before or after the form loads, on a change, or anything like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And that's just going to be the only thing I'm going to do for now. And I'm going to go ahead and preview the form. So there's this very fast development cycle with InfoPath where you just kind of go in and out of design and preview mode of the form. And so I think I said hi. And there's the alert message box. And so that was kind of nifty, just my fun little demo tip. And so I'm going to go ahead and back that up, close the preview. And so that was sort of the first neat thing. But I bet you're all saying, how many times I've been cornered by this coding without coding kind of thing. And so tell us how you can go and get some real code behind the form and to do some really neat stuff. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go click on the control, and I'm going to Tools Programming and go over to the onload event. So this is the onload event. Now I'm in Visual Studio, and I actually have full access to all of the tools of Visual Studio. You can see all of the Solution Explorer and all the properties. And I'm in the onload event. Oops, there we are. And here it is, write your own code. This code will travel with the form wherever it goes. You can see up here that there's a InfoPath object. So I'm going to type this X document. And right away you get the object browser. So the question is, what is this object that we're manipulating? So this object is the XML of the form. And so it really is just a way of navigating that XML tree. So I'm just going to go here and select the object model. And then you have all the access to the whole XML object model. So select single node. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the node. And this is where I've made a typo every time I've done this. So now you just type the XPath query to that node. So you remember we defined that field. My fields 1. Oh, you see, I told you. Field 1, got it. Hey, thanks for that help. And here's the browser for that. I'm just going to head and hit text, and then just say equals. So this is the hello world with code. So I just go hit F5, go ahead and run the form. And so what you'll see is hello world in there with the code from the onload event. So it kind of just works. All the debugger, all the tools are right there for you to use. So I think that's all pretty cool. So I'm going to go here and go back to the code. So I'm going to go back to this little example, and I'm going to create a brand new form, a new blank form from scratch, and I'm going to go back to the controls. I'm going to drag a text box over again. And this time I'm going to drag a section. And so a section keeps a whole bunch of controls in one place together on the screen and relates them. I'm going to put a text box in here and another one. And so I got 2 text boxes in here. And what these are going to be our digital signature. And I'm going to put another text box there. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to add a digital signature to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the form options and go over to digital signatures and enable digital signatures for the form. So I'm going to enable them for some specific data. So each item, you can either sign the whole form at one time, or you can sign individual controls. So it's really cool to sign individual controls, because the reason you would do that is to have a workflow and go through the organization. Go ahead and add a control. So this is a SIG1. And hey, which fields are we going to sign? Well, remember here is that the data that we created by the schema by design. So go ahead and add that. And I'm going to go ahead and add one more, 2 and 3, because I'm going to sign 2 fields here, and I'm really going to sign actually I'll sign that one. And so there we go, we have 2 places to go sign, so that seems pretty cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and preview the form again. Remember that fast turnaround cycle. Notice now there's a toolbar button for digital signatures. So I'm going to go here, go ahead and sign this, and all I have to do is now add a digital signature. And I'm going to sign the first field. So now I get to choose the names of the signatures that are on the machine. So when you deploy this, normally you would have a signature for the user of that machine, a way of them acquiring a signature, whether it's through a smart card or through deployment by pushing the signature onto the machine using management tools. So, of course, you can get access to all of the digital signatures on the machine. You could view them for authenticity. So here's the neat thing. So I'm going to just type a comment. But the neat thing is you get this snapshot of the form, which is we're going to actually save a ping file, a public network graphics representation of the form, so that you can detect any tampering that might have happened. Plus, we, of course, encrypt the whole thing and make it secure. So here you see the picture of the form. The user has to check, I have verified the content before signing, which is their way of signing. And you go ahead and sign, and there's the ping that gets saved with the image, and you're done. So go ahead and close it. And so now you see when you hover over that field, it has a signature there. And now if I try to modify it and change, it says this value has been digitally signed and cannot change. So you can now do workflow like add a submit button or code behind a button that will send that form off to the next person in the workflow. Or you can just mail it around as an attachment and send it off to the next person. And so I think that's pretty cool. So I've showed you all the neat things for how you would go about filling out a form, designing a form, and using it with a blank form. And so I'm going to go ahead and design a whole form from a customized sample. And so here's I don't want to do performance review. That seems a little harsh. But I'll do a status report. So this is the status report. I'm going to actually go ahead and this is just what the form looks like when you're done. So that's the blank form. But let's go ahead and preview this. Oops. While my machine catches up. Hang on a second. Yeah. I seem to be having VPC troubles right now. There we go. So I've got this in design mode, so I'm actually going to go ahead. I like this form the way it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into publish. So publish the form allows us to save the form out to Windows SharePoint services in a SharePoint library. Towards the end of the demo, I'll actually go through a little bit of SharePoint just to give a refresher. I know Steve Ballmer mentioned it this morning too. Go ahead and publish it to a SharePoint library. You can see you can publish it straight to a web server or to just a SMB file share as well. And I'm going to create a brand new form library. So the places that forms and InfoPath go are to a form library, which is a special list in SharePoint. Go ahead and save it there. And so sometimes this takes a second in the loopback tests that we've been doing. But what you get by publishing out to a SharePoint server is a place where you can save your files from any machine out on the internet or the intranet. You get a place to take the important information in the form and bubble it up as metadata. So you've heard, if you've used the custom properties in Office documents, this is essentially a custom properties view of the sheet. So I'm going to call it Form Library 1. Go ahead and do that. And I'm gonna. These are the standard fields in it, and I'm gonna leave those alone. I could of course go add any of the other schema elements in the form, but I think we've got enough for now. So now I'm gonna have out on the SharePoint site this form. and I could use SharePoint's notifications. WSS is Windows SharePoint Services. I can notify the users of the form. But what I'm going to do here is I've got a list of all the documents that are out on the server, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh that list. And you see Form Library 1. I'm going to go to the form library, and this is now the place where all of the instances of this form are going to be saved. So it's just basically, it looks like a details view of files. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out the form. So the template's been uploaded to the SharePoint server. I'm going to go ahead and fill out the form. That's my spam address. Anybody needs that? So you can go ahead and these are some very simple ways of doing the bulleted list that I mentioned before, like that. And in fact, many of them have all the fancy things behind that I've been mentioning. Like, for example, here has I can insert the time report into the section. So this is a conditional section where I have this fancy stuff with calculated fields, where I'm going to have 1 hour, and I actually used 0.5 hours, and it calculates the percent. And I can go up here, and I can either remove it or click and paste it. And over here, I can add another element of that repeating row. And so you see it has all the math built in, and pretty cool to do that. But I'm now just going to go ahead and save it. And so I'm going to save it. App pops that form library within the standard file save dialog. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. You're noticing it's actually just saving out the XML out to the form library. And if I go back to SharePoint and refresh it, there you see the form that we just filled out is right there. And the neat thing is it has all of these properties bubbled up. And because it's SharePoint, which I'll show in a second, we can do all sorts of neat things with creating custom views, filtered views, and as I'll show you later, this itself is a web service that's available to you to pull the information out. So some really neat stuff that you can do with Windows SharePoint Services, and all of the new features both in SP1 using managed code and digital signatures, but also the base product just doing all sorts of neat out-of-the-box stuff. So that's a quick overview of Windows SharePoint Services. There are a bunch of courses and talks on that, plus we have folks at the Cabana where you can talk to some more to learn about that. So what I'm going to do now is transition to a new topic, which is one that is near and dear to our hearts, and one that I would guess we've probably caused a little bit of challenges in the past, which is upgrading Microsoft Access. So how many of you have gone through the challenges of moving from one version of Access to another? Okay, so does this adequately reflect any frustrations that you might have had in doing so? It's too mild. Okay, thanks. This is my job. I've got to do this. In fact, it is too mild. We have not done a very good job at all of upgrading from version to version with Microsoft Access. So what we've done is, as part of Service Pack 1 for Office 2003, we've created the Microsoft Office Access Conversion Toolkit. And so this conversion toolkit is for the administrators or the deployment professionals in an organization to use that to help people move from one version of Access to the new one, whether that's Access 97, 2000, 2002, or 2003. And the idea is we've identified a class of problems that we've basically caused. And we're going to go back and help you to understand what problems we've caused and what we suggest needs to get done either on our part or hopefully on your part to fix that. So this conversion toolkit consists of 4 things. First, there's a scanning tool. So we wrote this application that will go out, and I'll show the application in the demo, and scan server shares for MDBs or access files and scan them at the file level, the DAO level, and at the access file properties level for all sorts of information. There's a GUI version of this, basically an access application, funny, and a command line tool as well that you could write batch files and script it and use for that. There's also a reporting front end. So it goes out and gathers all this information, and then we have a very rich front end for reporting on what it found in the process of doing that. We've also provided a bunch of e-learning and documentation for what to do with the errors and the issues that it finds. We have best practices and guidelines that aid you through the conversion from Access 97. And then finally, we changed some things in Microsoft Access that were definitely very bad in them, and I have a list of those in a second. So what did we find in Access? So we found a few common errors well, actually, we found some errors that we created that caused innumerable problems with customers. And so it was really, we did in all honesty, we did a pretty poor job in identifying, first in creating these errors, and then in identifying what they were. In fact, they were somewhat mysterious to us for a really long time. We would hear, oh, it doesn't work, we can't migrate, and we could never really understand what it was. And the reason was because it wasn't just the bugs in Access, but it was a combination of issues between the customer, the deployment, the end user, the communication with IT, because many of you know the applications are out there, you don't know about them. The person that created it was a vendor long since gone, and the end user just says, it says error 42. And there's no way to get back and forth in that communication. And so one of them was, we were unable to convert databases with uncompiled code. So the compact command hadn't been written. So that's sort of like a big duh, except we never detected that, and we did a bad job of telling anybody about it. So here's another big one, we automatically compact it for you when you want to convert it. So that was easy enough. We had a bunch of bogus references to old type libraries in Access. So old MDB files referred to some type libraries that it turns out we stopped shipping around the time of Office 2000. So every old Access 97 database that tries to open is referring, and they weren't even, like, I would feel maybe a smidgen of being okay if these were useful type libraries, but in fact they were like the ODBC help message type library. Like they were way off the scale, and that's how come we removed them, but we never actually dealt with the backward compatibility issues. So we actually just removed the references to those. And then finally, we thought that we were doing a pretty good job of automatically converting users to new databases when the product shipped. But what turned out to happen was a work group shared an SMB share of an Access MDB, and then the first person would open it with Access 2003 because they just got their brand new laptop, came with Office installed on it because they bought that, and they opened up the shared database, and all of a sudden the other 10 people can't read and write to that database anymore because this person was ahead of the curve and decided they would force the upgrade of everybody, which of course is not the intent. And so we basically just added a group policy that by default doesn't upgrade the database, and then just allows administrators to remove or suppress that dialog box or require that dialog box, depending on what it was that administrators or that you would prefer to do. So those are just some of the code issues that we dealt with in Service Pack 1 for Access 2003. And then you combine that with the tool and the other stuff, and I think we've got a pretty good story. So let me show you this tool and kind of show you what we've done there. So this is just what I've done is I've actually got the application, and then I went out and ran this on some real customer data. And I'll show you some aggregate numbers of that in a second, but this is the tool. So first thing that you can do is you can scan for some data. And so that brings up this very rich UI for adding a whole search list of paths to search for across your network. You can append results to an existing scan, so you can sort of do a test, keep building up the scans. You can analyze it. We can scan for DAO properties, access properties, and all sorts of stuff. And so that's just the options for really getting started. You can import a previously created log file. So you might have multiple sites that aren't connected by high bandwidth, so you can run them on multiple sites, aggregate them into one view, and then look at all the reports. And so now let's look at some of the data that got gathered. So this is a real customer site. So we have a whole bunch of reports. So I mentioned that we've identified some specific issues that are conversion and migration roadblocks. So this is a report of those issues. So you can look at the databases and issues. And so this is each database that it finds, followed by the issues that it contains. You can look at databases grouped by issues, or you can just have a quick summary. So if I did like a quick summary, this gives us all the databases that were scanned in this particular organization. So I should say this organization is a worldwide organization with several thousand users. And so you can see that it found about 6,500 databases with possible issues. I'll talk through a couple of these possible issues in a second. I just wanted to show you the report. And of course you can look at reports on specific databases. So here's databases and issues. And so this brings up sort of this brings up a report of all the different databases and what the particular issues were as well. And so you've got a whole lot of neat ways of looking at reports on the data. Also, we built in some nice charts. And so I find these particularly interesting because it just shows a graphical view of what's the challenge that an organization is going to face in migrating, and they're actually really interesting. So for example, here's date last opened. So that's an interesting stat because it shows how many of the databases haven't even been used in a long time. So as an administrator, that allows you to say, you know what, we're just going to kind of filter those out and ask the users, the owners of those databases, can we migrate those to tape backup or something like that? We actually have a rating for the database. Is it going to be easy to convert or not easy to convert? And so here in this particular database, you see that the vast, vast majority have no issues. A small number have unlikely, and then a very small number have a required interaction that you're going to have to do. And then here's a really interesting one. This is the file size of those MDBs. So how much storage is being taken up, and what's and you can see, most of them are pretty small. And in fact, most of the databases are less than 100, in fact, nearly all of the databases are less than 100 megabytes. So I think we all have similar environments that we're used to, which is most of them are small, and then there's that one that's pushing the 2 gigabyte limit, and that's the tough one. So that's some of the reports and things you can get. Here's one where you can go through each database one at a time. And you can basically just look at the database, and you can see all the information about it, and you can also see if it had any issues and what kind of things. We have ways of deciding, you can filter on anything with a .bak, with a tilde in the name. You can mark those as backups and deal with those and treat those separately. Because what we found is we added that actually after the first run and the first test of this tool, because we found that actually a lot of the databases were backups. And so there's really no reason to do all the work twice. Just sort of delete the backups, do the work. Actually, do the work, delete the backups. I am not an IT administrator, as you can tell. So that's a whole bunch of the features in this migration toolkit. So I feel like pretty good about that. And so I'm just going to be ready for the next demo. And so let's go back to the slides that we've got and talk about some of the real-world results in this, because it's really been phenomenal. We have scanned hundreds of thousands of customer databases. In fact, some of the folks who've done the work are going to be over manning the Access Cabana, and they'd be glad to talk to you about what we found and what we've learned. The thing that we learned, I have to be really honest, despite the fact that we made some egregious errors in release over release in building the product, it turns out that the vast majority of databases require no intervention. And so the analogy that I have in my head so that I can sleep at night is that it's sort of like, I'll say this, and you can't throw things at me, okay? But it's sort of like auto bullets and numbering in Word. So it's a feature that works like 999 times out of 1,000. But you wouldn't know that if I asked any of you. Because everybody, including myself, remember is the one time it didn't work. And so in many ways, what we're seeing with this access migration is that there's one database that happens to be, some dumb little app in the CIO's office that matters a lot or whatever, that doesn't convert, and then a zillion other apps that convert flawlessly that you never even hear about. And so what we've seen is, what we've done is we've given you a way to identify those apps before the migration so that we can go find them and work on them. And so the issues that we've seen, compiled applications, there's nothing, we can't uncompile it. So you do have to have the original source. Here's one that's been very interesting because it's a combination of deployment along with the changes that we made in the product. So one customer of ours, the way that they did the deployment was they have all of the user files routed on a network share. Great practice. So what did they do? They came by, they paved the machine. Oh, and they're also completely standardized on one particular Dell model desktop. So super homogeneous environment. So they'd pave the machine and blast an image onto it on Sunday night, and the person would come in on Monday morning with a brand new machine. They're all excited, and then none of their apps work on Access. So why is that? Because they forgot to snapshot the user settings, and all of the linked data sources were missing. So all the data source names that had been local to that machine were all broken and gone. So it turns out in this organization, they actually had one server with a whole bunch of SQL databases that they all connected to. So it's actually a really straightforward process to recreate or to create once and push using GPO onto those machines. But the users, the mysterious error messages that the end users got were amazing. And so there was this total fire drill to figure this out. So now we tell you, and so in fact, most of the databases that need attention are really just warning you, these have linked tables, so you can't pave the machine and expect it to work. And by the way, here's how to use the linked table manager and Access and address those issues. We did have some reserve word keyword changes that turned out to bite us, and some canonical naming things that came along. So definitely some things there. So here's some real world numbers. So first, out of out of 35,000 MDBs, so this is just one customer, large multinational, lots of multilingual issues in this one. Over 80%, nothing at all. So you just convert, migrate, no problem at all. 11% had linked tables, so that was just unlikely, but a warning. So you're now up to almost 92%, where there's basically no intervention with the deployment done properly. And then there are a couple of them. There are some linked tables with reserved names and some weird things there. Database passwords. Of course, if the database has a password, an automated tool can't scan it. So there's 1.5% right there that you just need the passwords to. This particular customer, all multilingual databases, so there were some sort order issues coming from Win98 where there wasn't Unicode and moving forward. And then the required intervention, the vast majority of them are databases that are MDEs, and so these compiled applications that you need to tend to. So really, this turns out to be a very tractable, manageable problem if done correctly, but where we fell short was in giving you the tools to provide support for doing that migration. So I think with Service Pack 1, with the conversion toolkit, going from 97, 2000, 2002 to 2003 becomes a whole lot easier, and you're able to do it with a lot more information. So that's a quick look at the Access Conversion Toolkit. Let me just round out this talk by talking about Microsoft's SharePoint strategy. So this is our strategy for a spectrum of websites that's around collaboration and communication amongst teams working with and individuals, divisions or small work groups, and the enterprise. And so it involves a series of products, starting with Microsoft or Windows SharePoint Services, which is part of Windows Server 2003, and that's the base collaborative experience in Windows. And then it goes all the way to SharePoint Portal Server, which is our enterprise-wide portal server that provides for publication, notification, enterprise-wide search that can aggregate information from sources like SQL, notes databases, Exchange public folders, all of that gathered into the portal server for a rich, personalized search and portal experience. To give you an idea of Microsoft, the Microsoft Intranet, MS Web, is an out-of-the-box SharePoint portal site just run by a very small team that aggregates information from all over the company, from all over the globe. All of these are connected by a rich programmable platform in Windows SharePoint Services. So what I'd like to do is kind of go through some of these features, tell you about the collab services, doc management, enterprise app. I'd love to show you all of those, but I really don't have time, and there's a great couple of sessions on the SharePoint family, starting with Windows SharePoint Services, and that really show you all of the neat things in the product. So SharePoint Portal Server and Project Server are both enterprise applications built on top of the team collaboration site, Windows SharePoint Services. And so it really provides for a rich experience for the intranet, for teams collaborating, for the intranet for the enterprise working together, and for the extranet. And in fact, we run SharePoint sites out on the extranet for collaboration with our partners and with MVPs and people like that. And we have a number of dozens of third parties hosting Windows SharePoint Services, so you can, on a monthly or yearly rate, buy hosted SharePoint out on the internet for you to use. And so there's a lot of incredibly rich scenarios that are enabled by having this core collaborative infrastructure. Then there's a great development and customization story. So first, there's a .NET-based site and page platform. Excuse me, that's what Windows SharePoint Services is. Then we have a web services interface to Windows SharePoint Services. So that means all the features of SharePoint are available to you as a web service. So you want to pull data out as a web service, you can do that. You want to push data in as a web service, you can do that. And of course, you can create and manage the webs and the sites and the users all from within the web user interface, from within our tool front page, which I'll show in a second. Underlying all of this is the web part framework. So web parts are sort of like little meta controls on each web page that you can create in Visual Studio. In fact, in Visual Studio Widby, there's a whole bunch of additional support for creating web parts. And you host those within your SharePoint site, whether it's Windows SharePoint Services or Portal. And then you can access those from within development tools, or as end users, you can add and remove and customize web parts from any given web page. And so this allows you to have a whole library of web parts, some that might do things just like connect up to news feeds and show those, others that might connect to line of business applications, and then you might write code in Visual Studio that connects those web parts and builds a whole line of business front end. So as an example, using web parts, we monitor our site traffic on the Office Online website as a series of web parts written as a Windows SharePoint Services website. So there's a very rich end-user platform combined with a very rich developer platform. One of the things that we've done is build a lot of programmability of the Windows SharePoint experience into FrontPage 2003 as well. So many of you have probably tried FrontPage in the past, and I bet some of you think, you know, gosh, kind of a nice little WYSIWYG HTML editor, but maybe a little bit of not a professional tool or a little bit low end for our taste. So what we've done in FrontPage 2003 is really raise the bar on professional site editing. And I'll show you, and first, you know, by just supporting things like XSLT and having data views on data, which I will show, and a whole way of working with rich XML data is certainly the first step. We've added the ability to do round-tripping HTML really close to flawlessly, targeting different browsers, working really well with just FTP for file upload. So we've really rounded out the professional HTML authoring in FrontPage. We have conditional formatting for a rich presentation of data that's all calculated on the server. So it's actually really straightforward to do that. And we allow you to connect to databases with no code, but then also have full access to XSLT and the schema definition for customization. So a whole bunch of cool stuff in there. So I'm going to do a quick demo of some of the features in FrontPage as well. So the first thing I want to do, though, is just go to the home page of the Windows SharePoint Services site and show everybody a quick look at what you get. Again, nothing up my sleeves demos. This is the installed by default Windows SharePoint Services site, and minus the announcement that says "Welcome to SharePoint" because it's been installed. It was installed more than a week ago. But basically, this is an out-of-the-box collaboration site for users. So the first thing that you can do is, you know, how do you add something to the site? Well, you just go and you click Add an Announcement, and I can do something just really easy like "Welcome to WSS." And you know, we enable the use of rich text in these fields and save and close that. And there's your announcement with welcome, and you know, you can go and look at an item. And so here's this nice list. I can edit the item, delete it. I can actually do an alert where I say, hey, every time something in this list changes, send me email. And so that's one of the core concept of Windows SharePoint Services is this notion of a list. So SharePoint has lots of lists built in. What kind of list does it have? It has lists like we saw earlier, a form library. It has the ability to just have document libraries. You want to put a bunch of Word documents or PDF or photos or something like that. Easy to do with the document library. We saw announcements. It has contact lists where you can export those contacts from Outlook. It has event lists, which are calendar views on lists, which you can view inside of Outlook in the side-by-side calendar view of Outlook 2003. And these are just some of the built-in lists. Actually, here's one that I created. It's just a list of all the states and their capitals in the United States. It was pretty easy to create. In fact, I had that as an Excel spreadsheet, and I just imported it into Windows SharePoint Services. Windows SharePoint Services allows you to create different views of these lists as well. So I can choose which columns I want to show. I can add a new column if I wanted, like if I wanted a comments field, for example. So I could add comments. The fields can be all sorts of types. I could have multiple lines of text, currency. I could do lookups where I go to another list in SharePoint and look things up, or I can go to a fixed set of things, just like you do when you're programming Access. So all sorts of neat stuff there, but I won't go ahead and do that. And you can also create all sorts of views on the list. So the views are really interesting because that's what is really cool with using InfoPath, because you can have all the forms in the library, but say you only want to view ones whose status is completed or whose dollar value is a certain number. It's very easy to do that. The views can be standard. Datasheet is a rich client UI that basically uses a miniature version of Excel called the Office Web Component to display the list, and I'll show you that in a second, or a calendar view. Oops. My virtual PC kicked in again. Oh, virtual PC. That's cool, because that way I can stall and talk about that. Well, sorry. No, VPC is this great tool that allows you to run whole instances of Windows and run different applications within it. So in fact, I'm running this whole version of Windows inside, hosted by another version of Windows. There are demo CDs of this all over the place, and you can also download the demo from Microsoft.com. So let's go back to the home page. And so those are some of the basic things. Let's look. I think I'll just leave it. We have general discussions as well there for you to use as well. But one of the things that's really cool is I want to go to Microsoft Access. So one of the neat things, remember I said that all of the data is exposed as a web service. So let me go ahead and connect to the database, get the external data that's actually in the website. So I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to say that I'd like to go and get Windows SharePoint Services. There's my favorite local host. Oopsie. Well, maybe I won't do that right now. How about I won't do that right now? I see, yeah, something was going on there. So I'm going to actually, let's see, what do I want to do? I will give it one more shot, and then if I fail, because it's not a Turing machine I'm running, it might actually be different. Oh well, I apologize for that. So I won't try to do that for you right now. But what you can do, also I will show you how to customize the site with front page. So what I did in front page, I just opened up the site. So I did site open and pointed it at localhost, and lucky for you, I had this page opened already. And so here is the home page actually that you just saw, and you're able to edit and move these all around. Each one of these is one of those web parts I mentioned. So in fact, if I wanted to add the contacts or the employee list or any of those lists to my home page, I just drag and drop them right there. One of the neat things that I can do too is I'm going to use front page. Remember I talked about getting to different sources of data. So one of the neat things in front page is here's a blank page. I'm actually going to, with any luck, I'm going to go in and pop in this data view of a RSS feed. So this is actually John Udell's RSS feed. So which, as you know, an RSS feed is nothing but a well-formed XML document. And so I just kind of put it in the website. Front page automatically formats this on the server and generates HTML for you to view in the standard browser. And what's really cool is on the server, first you see we have all of the schema and all of the data right there. So I can do all sorts of customization. Which fields do I want to show? How do I want to customize things? So for example, here I have this, and what I want to do is, let's see, do conditional formatting on a particular field. So maybe I want to show the content if a certain condition is met. So here I can do all sorts of stuff. In fact, I can do advanced XSLT transforms on the data if I really wanted to be fancy about how to do conditional formatting of the data. I have access to doing filtering, sorting, grouping. I can show different styles of this as well. So I can show different views of the RSS feed. And here you see just I did it by this tabular view, all sorts of stuff right there. Now this works with, I showed it with XML data, but as you can see by what we call the data source catalog, you can connect to Windows SharePoint Services lists through a web service. You can connect to other SharePoint libraries. You can connect to traditional database connections, XML files, also server-side scripts, and generic XML web services. So all of those are easily programmed within front page. And by the way, I mentioned that we improved the HTML editing of front page. So here's it's still the standard stuff where I can do everything like before. But the neat thing is now, as you see up here, you see the little tags going along, and I have I can select the tag contents, I can remove the tag, I can add HTML, I can set properties on the tags if I wanted to extend them. As I select things, you can see that the tag moves with the selection. And in fact, what we've added is, first you can see the code view of that page. So this works with HTML, but it also works with ASP, XML, XSLT. All of the different HTML formats work just fine. And that's about all I'm going to show because that little VPC thing happened again. But I can also have a split view where I am able to look at the code and the preview all at the same time. So that's a quick look at front page and at the user features of SharePoint, customization with web parts, and a whole bunch of cool stuff. What I didn't get to show that I really wanted was you can also connect from Access to any of those SharePoint lists, use Access as reports and forms just as though they were JET data or SQL data. So I want to wrap up by talking a little bit about the Customer Experience Improvement Program. How many of you running Office 2003 have maybe crashed? No, you haven't. You're just making me feel bad on purpose. Well, it turns out that if you do crash in Office 2003, you got prompted with a dialog box that said, hey, we would like to help you out, or I'd like to help you out. Please, I'd send you the information about this crash. It's anonymous, it's private, it's voluntary, it defaults to off, but if you send us that information, we learn lots about what's going on in the product. And it turns out that what we learn is that there are a very small number of bugs that happen to a very, very large number of people. And we didn't know that before. Before, we used to just sort of guess what bugs to fix and what crashes were happening. So what you see is an actual graph of the bugs that we've had in Office 2003 and the frequency with which they've crashed. And you can see a very small number of bugs have caused most of the crashes. And in fact, what we've found is that we've radically improved the quality of the product by fixing a small number of issues throughout the development process and through the Service Pack 1. So we had 500,000 people use Beta 2 of Microsoft Office 2003. Some of you might have been those folks, and I thank you for sending those crash reports to us. We had we had some amazing statistics in that by the time we shipped the Beta 2 refresh to users, 9 out of 10 users of the product had not experienced any crashes in the first 90 days of using the product, and then we shipped. But they had not experienced the crash. What we did in SP1 in Office 2003 is we fixed over 400 crashing issues. So by doing that, we're able to eliminate over almost 40% of all of the crashes experienced by people outside of Microsoft. So we made a huge investment in fixing these and did a great job in just trying to reduce the crashes people see. The 30% is the number that we fixed by changing the code. An additional 10% were fixed by working with third parties and working with workarounds or documentation that explain what the issue is. And so we've really done a great job. We actually ported all of those fixes back to XP Service Pack 3. So if you're running that and you installed SP3, you'll also see some significant quality improvements. And we also, using the same technology, updated 3,400 help articles about the product that identify issues that people were seeing in the real world. This is very different than we used to be, where we used to get a crash, and product support would call us up and say, guess what? You guys are getting a lot of crashes, and there are crashes in 0xF3B42. So please go fix that. And we have, of course, no way of doing anything. We couldn't repro it. We couldn't fix it. And now, every single day, every developer on the Office team comes to work and looks at a website that says, hey, how do I fix our bugs? And the bugs that are in my code. And we're doing that day in and day out. So we're super committed to improving the real-world quality of Office as you experience it every day. And I feel really good about the progress. Of course, one crash is one crash too many. And we're extending this to not just crashes, but to hangs as well, which turn out to be a rather significant problem, as many of you can attest to. And so we really have the tools in place to make significant progress on improving the quality of the software. And these tools are unique. They don't exist in other products, and they don't exist in other parts of our industry. This is something that we're very uniquely committed to. So today, I really want to thank everybody for their time. We had a chance to see InfoPath, what's new in that, what's new in Service Pack 1, Access 2003's conversion toolkit, and also the fixes that we did in Service Pack 1. And a quick look at Windows SharePoint Services and some of the opportunities there. And I very briefly touched on our commitment to improving the quality, not just for new releases, but for existing products that are already in the market that you have used and deployed as well. So I thank you very, very much for your time. I want to remind folks that I'll be hanging out at the Cabana where the Office products are right after this, so I'd love to chat with some of you. So thank you very much.